Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, June the 30th, 2022. First up, working girls. There was a TikTok video made by someone calling herself Natasha Badger, which was linked to on a Twitter thread called a Twitter account called @ColdHealing, and it quickly went viral. A day in my life as a 22-year-old working in Chicago, living in Chicago, working in tech. And I'm going to go through it. Selfies, traveling to work, walking to work, fussing with her hair and smirking at the camera in the building. Oh, look, here's a eucalyptus wrap. The meeting was canceled, but and there's orange water, and here's some cups of fruit and a LinkedIn mug drinking out of, and signing up onto LinkedIn. Oh, look, here's some art which is made with recycled trees, i.e. wood. And here is some fancy drink. And walking down the stairs, oh, look, there's a little diversity there. Welcome to Company Connect, where you watch inspirational videos of other employees having a great time at work. Oh, look, and here's the kitchen with some disgusting food. And again, another LinkedIn mug, people playing ping pong, not doing any work, then chilling out in the quiet room. And once again, show that LinkedIn mug. And yes, so, look, kettle chips. Oh, and a little chocolate treat called Unreal. Welcome to LMS OSO Marketing. Oh, she's in marketing. And going to a pub after work and drinking some, doesn't look like beer to me, a very odd looking hamburger, a banana pie, whatever that is. Oh, a little more diversity here. And then out on the town, another drink or two. So she took her work laptop to the bar with her and decided it was time to call it a night. So her day went from something like 6 in the morning till midnight. Follow-up video, watched more videos, and her salary for this job is 24 hours. Disgruntled Dank Bird commented, meanwhile, some blue-collar workers out there keeping civilization running, working in labor, enduring long hours, shitty schedules, little sleep, getting his hands dirty, running in black coffee and making sure the job is done right. Yes, they make six figures too. Mitchell Wakefield comment, a lot of tech companies are just adult daycare at this point. And there are pictures. Oh, look, here's a meeting room, and the floor is covered with those balls, like in those things they used to have in McDonald's where the kids would wade amongst the balls because these are adults. Oh, and look, there's a slide for adults, and video games and the like. Yeah. So let's look at some comments on this. Tucker Carlson had said, I don't think it was with reference to this precisely. For millions of young college-educated Canadians, life is low-paid drone work at some soulless digital company, punctuated only by brunch on the weekends and Netflix and white wine at night, forever, until you die alone with no descendants to remember you. Charter Smoke responded, no problem with her going to adult daycare. A lot of people graduating from college are. However, neoliberal economy is just one big scam, and we better hope another scam is lined up or we are in big trouble. Another comment from Prussian Bot. Who needs a house and family when you have a cool corporate culture, free snacks, and a constantly changing roster of friends in the big city? Sydney Blake, 2000, commented, the powers that be must keep the labor supply up to keep wages down, but there is also the windfall to private equity in the form of outsourced childcare, house cleaning, meal prep. That is actual real work that once upon a time was done by stay-at-home wives. And Darren Beatty had some things to say about this. A related story uh, from Mimetic Sisyphus. Both work in tech, and there's the smirking woman. Does she have a thumb ring? Is that a thumb ring on the left? And some fellow on the right. Both work in tech. One made a video saying he thought bodegas were shit. The other embarrassed her company by showing she goes to daycare instead of work. Only one was fired. Scuffed B. Wiley commented, everyone wants to find Bodega Bro a new job, but I contend he should get a TV show where he travels to different historically esteemed cities in the world and proceeds to shit on the rod of globalism in portrait mode. Our Midwestern Carl Pilkington call it a Chad abroad. Yes, I was talking recently about parasitism in government, in NGOs, and in private enterprise, particularly Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies. You know, the question from Office Space comes up, what is it you say you do here? Oh, let's go to the all hands meeting to talk about what exactly. And the all hands meeting is canceled. So then you can go to a quiet room to recover from the trauma of your meaningless all hands meeting being canceled. Same meme memorial account tweeted, I mean, it's been said, but I cannot get over how there are hundreds of thousands of women earning $50K at jobs that are basically adult playtime daycare, so their company doesn't get sued by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This girl for real spends her workday drinking 10 different fruit waters while watching a teleconference, then studied for a pretend certification and had zero doubts about whether or not her job was real. I watched this whole video and there's literally not a second of work that gets accomplished. Usually they at least have, and then I was in a meeting and then I answered some emails. But in all this, all she does is explore and eat and socialize. I love how the closest thing she does to real work is buckling down to study for a market certification. Yeah, you know, these girls are skating from an upper middle class family to a top 50 college and then right into one of those jobs that's waiting for them upon graduation. Darren Beatty commented on same meme, that's until they cash out for 1 to 5 million with some bogus sexual harassment threat. The economy is totally fake. And on this subject, this is from a account which is no longer on Twitter, same meme. I guess the original same meme. This was from December of last year. The best possible use of the metaverse is to allow women to have pretend jobs where they send virtual emails and have Zoom conversations about pretend projects, all safely sequestered in virtual reality away from actual work done by men, of course. They'll get a little stipend for their hard work that they can use to buy themselves brunches and whatever other little treats they want. They also have a virtual boss who gives them constant praise. Once a week, they can meet with a virtual professional and trustworthy looking female doctor who will listen to them talk about their various mental and physical issues, then prescribe them placebo pills and a good amount of self-care. Indeed, if we were to add up all of the parasitical, useless jobs that exist to prop up the GDP, how much of the GDP would disappear? 10%, 20%, 30%, more? More? Here's another example. Here's a tweet from the Australian ambassador for women and girls. Why women and girls? Girls are women. Why not just Australian ambassador for women? Anyway, this is what she has to say. The consequences of climate change can exacerbate the risk of sexual and gender based violence, especially those facing intersecting forms of discrimination, including Indigenous women and girls. Listen to Australia's HRC 50 annual statement discussion on women's rights. So, who is this woman when she's at home? She is called Christine Clark. And let's find out more about Christine Clark, CSC. I'm assuming that's some sort of Australian honor. Prior to commencing in the role of Ambassador for Women and Girls, Christine Clark worked with the Pacific Gender Section in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, a bogus, made-up, useless, parasitical job. On reserve service following completion of her lengthy full-time Navy career in June 2021. Well, this is a woman who appears to be in her 50s, full-time Navy career. So what, she spent several decades in the Navy? What did she do in the Navy? Christine served as Australia's defense advisor and attaché to New Zealand, Cook Islands, and Chile between 2018 and 2021. Christine has held many senior Navy and Australian Defence Force roles and executive committee positions, including head of the ADF Sexual Misconduct Prevention and Response Office, and served as commanding officer of HMAS Kutubul. She was awarded a Conspicuous Service Cross in the Australia Day Honours List in 2013 for excellence in leadership. As a committed Alphabet People ally, Christine led the Department of Defense contingent in the Sydney Mardi Gras on 2 occasions. She is also a strong advocate for women's rugby and cricket. Christine holds a Master of Human Resource Management Organizational Change, a made-up degree from Charles Sturt University, a Bachelor of Business Marketing, of course, from the New South Wales Institute of Technology, and is an Australian Human Resources Institute medalist. Australian Human Resources Institute medalist. Quite an accomplished woman, wouldn't you say? I mean, no one could deny it. Here's another accomplished woman, this time for Canada. This is from Taylor Blewett at the Ottawa Sun. Lisa MacLeod is no longer a member of Doug Ford's cabinet, announced Friday she would be taking time off as the newly re-elected MPP for Nepean to focus on her health. In a statement tweeted an hour after Ford unveiled his new cabinet, which did not include MacLeod, the longtime Progressive Conservative MPP said she was following guidance from her doctor and medical support team. She has a whole team to, quote, take some time off to address and improve my health, unquote. MacLeod said that the past few years had been difficult for many people, and her mental and physical health and well-being had been greatly impacted. She said her focus over the next few months would be healing, resting, and recuperating. Oh, so this woman who had been in cabinet, she's a bit of an odd person. Let's put it that way. So she gets dropped from cabinet and immediately announces she's not going to be working anymore. Well, nice work or non-work if you can get it. She said, quote, I've spoken previously about some of my wellness challenges. As many people can understand and know all too well themselves, maintaining your mental and physical health is a constant challenge. There are ups and downs. I am down now, but will stand up again soon. This is neither goodbye nor a route to another job. While temporarily taking a breather is not a decision I've taken lightly, it is the right one to make now, unquote. She told Nepean constituents that while they may see less of her this summer, her team would be there to assist them. MacLeod's cabinet exit and break from her renewed MPP job follows a rocky election campaign. So this woman was roiled with physical and mental health problems, which she didn't divulge to the voters of her Nepean riding, got reelected because it's a safe seat, and then decided to go on paid vacation for the next few months. The NDP revealed that MacLeod had drawn a $44,000 allowance from her Progressive Conservative Riding Association, which receives public subsidies between 2018 and 2020, on top of her six-figure salary as a cabinet minister. A handful of other PC MPPs were then revealed to have received riding association allowances as well, and the issue dogged for Premier Ford on the campaign trail. Yes, this is a woman who has just announced that she is not up to doing her job. So why did she run again? Because she wants the salary, and the longer she serves in office, the bigger her pension will be when she takes a permanent vacation. I have seen this come up in Canada several times, where female members of parliament or members of provincial assemblies have said, oh, yes, something has happened to affect me, or I've been accused of something, so I'm just going to bugger off for a while. Still get paid. Still get paid. At a mental health related event in 2021, the MPP said she had a mood disorder and had dealt with anxiety and depression. Yes. It doesn't seem very controversial to me that if you're not up to your job, well, you should resign. But that would be misogynist, I suppose. And here is a piece from National News Watch from two women, Erica Raymond and Melanie Thomas. Melanie spelled Melinee. And as Kingsley Amis once noted in a novel, that one comes across a name like that, spelled like that, one always wonders whether her parents were artistic or simply couldn't spell. They begin, after 2 years of pandemic-enforced remote work, many workplaces across Canada are determining the ideal balance between in-person and remote work. Parliament must do the same. When the House of Commons rose for the summer, Canada's members of Parliament lost the option to participate virtually in a hybrid Parliament where they have the option of in-person or virtual meeting attendance and voting. But discontinuing the use of a hybrid Parliament is a mistake. A hybrid Parliament has the potential to make Canada's core democratic institutions more representative and inclusive. Hybrid parliaments can be more welcoming for women and underrepresented groups, but in order to reap these benefits, any future hybrid parliamentary model must be designed with equity and accessibility in mind. All the usual considerations around remote work are relevant for parliamentarians, particularly with respect to commute times and work-life balance. But Parliament is more than a workplace. It is a democratic institution responsible for representing the interests and diversity of the Canadian people, holding governments accountable for their actions and passing the laws by which we're all governed. Given this unique role, considerations about remote versus in-person operations take on added significance. A hybrid work model for MPs has the potential to help Parliament better reflect the Canadian population, both in terms of who is present and which voices are heard. Currently, white men, boo, make up 36% of the Canadian population, but are consistently an absolute majority of MPs. The average age of MPs is also typically at least 10 years older than Canadians. You might want to consider why that is, Erica and Melanie. Research repeatedly confirms who someone is and how they experience the world shapes the issues and positions they bring forward in political debate. Oh, you needed research to come up with that conclusion? Having MPs that look like Canadians is a minimum requirement for Parliament to fulfill its representational function. How might a hybrid Parliament work? To participate in Parliament in person, MPs must travel to Ottawa. Agonizing. To complete constituency duties, MPs must be present in their districts. Again, exhausting. For many, this leads to a grueling commute. Allowing remote participation creates spaces for representatives who may struggle to travel due to disability, parental and caring responsibilities, or illness. Once again, if you're not up to the job, resign. Evidence from the United Kingdom shows that women MPs are considerably more likely to participate in Parliament virtually because it helped them balance their work as MPs with caring responsibilities at home. They're not doing any work. They're not doing any work at all. Hybrid parliamentary proceedings alone cannot upend the systems of discrimination that make it harder for women, racialized people, who racialize them, by the way, and people with disabilities to have political careers. But giving MPs the option to participate remotely sends an important signal about who is welcome within the institution. Critics of the hybrid model argue that we lose something essential when Parliament meets online instead of person. The capacity of MPs to represent their constituents and hold the government to account, they argue, is undermined if these functions are filled via video conference. Yes, apparently showing up to work is too much for female politicians, so we must make a joke of Parliament in order to accommodate them. Let's go to the chat. Chogokin666, hello. Says, I'm not even kidding. NBC is having a July the 4th Ukraine extravaganza with all manner of stars and musical guests. July the 4th. Remind me, is there any special significance of that date in the United States of America? Hello, Dan, who says, will they add an extra Y to July as well? Hello to Brian Frakes, Anran, Dawn from Beyond. Hello to Gamion. David the Gnome says, I think Oren McIntyre made the remark that there is something like 1,000% chance that the Ukraine Celeb Fest will end with a collective singing of the song Imagine. Hello to Dan. Anran says, I don't know what is objectively the best song ever written, but I certainly know the worst one. Yes, that would be John Lennon's Imagine. Oh, it's unbearable. Just unbearable. Chogokin666 says, best brunch ever. Wicked Wolf, amazing French onion soup, au gratin, steak and eggs, home fries, Irish soda bread, real butter in the jar, Bloody Mary, amazing coffee. Well, sounds delish. Thumb ring, eh? Says Brian Frakes, but they don't do archery. Gamion says, on a more positive note, today is the last day of the month of the gays. Chokin666 says, never trust a thumb ring person. Dawn from Beyond says, some chuckles gleaned from 5th grade student essays. Too much alcohol gave him a weekend brain. My parents went on the cruise ship to Bermuda. Climate change led to global warming. A lot of tech jobs aren't real jobs, says David the Gnome. Well, you know that it's not a real job when it's possible for employees to spend, 80 to 90% of the working day on the company's Slack channel, blasting other employees for not being sufficiently intersectional and blasting management. Hello to Jim N. Word, new name to me. James Top made it to the tomb of the unknown soldier today. Around 5,000 people downtown Ottawa right now. Hello to William Hicks and Yo Mama and to Hauper. And I want a degree in Aristotelian awesome sauce, says Teleologic Jones. Looking forward to KMG's birthday stream. That's on a weekend, isn't it? My birthday is July the 2nd, which is Saturday. So no, there won't be a stream. But I will get in National Generic Holiday Day and the 4th of July. Tarot Destroyer says Laos is the most heavily bombed country relative to its population in history. The United States dropped 270 million bombs on it between 1964 and 1973, even though the two countries were never officially at war. Respectable commenting name says, imagine a world where Yoko Ono never upset Chuck Berry. Mika Brzezinski, well, there's a lot of people on television who shouldn't be on television. Not all of them are women, but a lot of them are women. And one of the reasons being is they tend to get hysterical, or they are constantly hysterical, or even continuously hysterical. One such is Mika Brzezinski. I am fairly certain that no one would have heard of Mika Brzezinski if not for her father. Her father was a very clever man called Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was an expert on Soviet relations, and he was the Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. And what else she has going for her, I have no idea, none whatsoever. She's not intelligent. She's not well spoken. She is not good looking. But there we are. This is from CNS News. On the brink of tears, quivering with outrage, Democrat activist Mika Brzezinski told viewers of MSNBC's Morning Joe Monday that the Trump wing of today's Republican Party are a, quote, group of fascists. She was reacting to last week's Supreme Court ruling sending abortion decisions back to the states. So what does Donald Trump's America look like? Brzezinski asked. In reality, it looks like a 13-year-old rape and incest victim being ordered by the state to have a forced birth of a rapist baby. That's where we are in 2022. And for all the Democratic Party's flaws, they're the only party that can stem this continued rise of fascism. Register and vote. Work toward an overwhelming majority that can protect your body, protect your freedoms, and just may save our country. Brzezinski used the word fascist or fascism 6 times in an emotional rant, remarkable for its bitterness and scorn. Oh, it was Winston Churchill, oh, here we go, who said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. And the same might be said of the Democratic Party at this point. The Democratic Party is the world's last best hope against fascism, against an extreme, autocratic, anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-contraception, anti-freedom collection of fascists. She drew out the word who dominate the Trump wing of today's Republican Party, a group of fascists who even refused to investigate the violent riots that their president launched on January 6th to overthrow a legitimately elected president. Why? Because they are fascists. And now they're claiming control of your bodies, your health, your life. And they promise they're coming next to take away your birth control pills and even what you do with another consenting adult in the privacy of your own bedroom. To call Trump's Republican Party and Trump's Supreme Court extreme understates the danger these institutions pose to American freedom, to our democracy. They are fascists. Fascists. Mika Brzezinski couldn't fill the inside of a matchbook cover of what she knows about fascism, which was a political movement that died in a bunker in Berlin in 1945. A short time later, historian Michael Beschloss joined Morning Joe saying, I certainly agreed with what Mika said at the beginning about fascism. This is fascist in many ways. Yeah, okay. Again, I guess I've never read anything by Beschloss, but I'm not going to. Oh, this is authoritarian. Oh, all right. Sending it back to the states, sending it back to the voters is, golly, it's fascist. It's authoritarian. But she married the boss, so she has her spot on MSNBC. Speaking of the neoliberal economy, is it coming to an end? This is from Thomas Barabi at the New York Post. Recent reports of layoffs at Tesla are an ominous sign for white-collar workers nationwide, Big Short investor Michael Burry predicted Wednesday. Burry argued that blue-collar workers will stay in hot demand in a labor market that has remained tight so far despite a looming recession, while office workers could face job and salary losses. He tweeted, I see a bifurcated labor market developing as unskilled and semi-skilled remain in short supply, but white-collar workers haven't proven their redundancy during COVID will find gross excess in the labor market, pressuring wages at the end. This is an excellent point. Oh, you're going to work from home. Oh, work from home. Doing what? Exactly. And of course, I saw one of these stories where they showed a woman at in the kitchen, one of those kitchens that has a bench in the middle of it, for chopping things up and the like. And I guess they've got cupboards underneath. It's typically, marble or fake marble. There she was with her laptop, and there was a baby crawling on the island. Now, why would you have a baby crawling on something which is, 40 inches off the floor? Because the baby, were the baby to slip off it, um, could be very unfortunate. How much work is any woman going to get done when there is a baby crawling around her? And since it's presumably her baby, um, she will want to pay attention to the baby rather than her work. Again, it was reported to me just a couple of days ago that something like over 60% of Service Canada workers are still working remotely, which tells me that at least half of them could be fired and no one would notice. The hedge fund chief weighed in on current labor market conditions while sharing a link to a report detailing Tesla's move to lay off about 200 workers, including a data analyst, and shut down a San Mateo office dedicated to the company's autopilot semi-autonomous driving system. Tesla's latest round of layoffs occurred weeks after CEO Elon Musk unveiled plans to slash 10% of the company's salaried workers. The billionaire has warned that he has a super bad feeling about the state of the U.S. economy. Despite the cuts, Musk still expects Tesla's overall workforce to expand in the months ahead. Wages have risen over the past year as companies compete for workers during a period in which the national unemployment rate has fallen below 4%. Again, this is a useless figure because it does not count those people who have stopped looking for the work. And that number has been consistently over 90 million for many years now in the United States. But inflation has largely erased those wage gains for many workers, and unemployment is expected to rise as the Federal Reserve hikes interest rates. Aside from his labor market forecast, Burry has made a series of predictions about what's next for the U.S. economy in recent days. Earlier this week, Burry tweeted that a supply chain phenomenon known as the bullwhip effect could force retailers to lower their prices, thereby cooling inflation and incentivizing the Fed to reverse course on its planned rate hikes. Burry, who often deletes his tweets shortly after he posts them, also warned in late May about a consumer recession as inflation cuts into household savings amassed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Burry, 51, is the founder and boss at Scion Capital Management. Actor Christian Bale portrayed Burry in The Big Short, the 2015 film chronicling his bet against the subprime mortgage crisis during the Great Recession. And you know who's responsible for this recession? You and you and you and you. I've seen this argument. It's become a mainstream narrative, and it's ridiculous, but that's where we are now. This is by Javier David at Axios. Fear of a recession could be the final straw that actually tips the economy into that recession, some analysts say. Persistent inflation and the Federal Reserve's campaign to rein it in are conspiring. Oh, they're conspiring to tip the economy into a downturn, one that even Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledges could metastasize, just like cancer, into a recession. Wall Street, Main Street, and Washington all have differing opinions about the likelihood of a recession and how deep it's likely to be if that happens. Wall Street economists have been gradually hiking their recession forecasts. Their estimates now put the likelihood of a recession somewhere between 30 and 50%, or as veteran market analyst Peter Bookvar opined last week, a staggering 99%. In an Instagram post, Ritholtz Wealth CEO Downtown Josh Brown recently argued that we may talk ourselves into recession, giving the sharp downturn in consumer psychology. Spend, 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 and spend some more. And if you don't have the money, borrow the money, because the GDP is counting on you. If enough people believe it's time to rein in their spending and then act on that belief, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, Brown wrote. Even if growth slows without becoming a recession, people instinctively know that something's just not right. Although consumer demand remains strong, cracks are starting to show up in the labor market. Some tech companies are laying off employees, and jobless claims are inching up from 50-year lows. As Axios's Courtney Brown wrote recently, bond and commodity prices are tilting the narrative toward a more conventional recession in which inflation and growth fall in tandem. Yes, Capital Economics warned in a research note that economy jitters are overdone because negative sentiment has yet to slow down consumption, among other factors. Consume, consume. Um, Most of the workers who lost their jobs because of the Corona doom panic were women, reversing a decades long trend in 2020 for the first time in history. The number of female workers in the American workforce exceeded that of male workers in the workforce. But the fact that most of the workers who lost their job because of the Corona doom panic were female tells me that they are not essential, simply not essential. And of course, when women look after the household, as noted in a tweet I read previously, there's a whole bunch of spending which becomes unnecessary, and that is considered wicked. It is considered wicked to stay home, look after the children, look after the household, because it's a crime against the GDP, which is our God. Here is something from, here's another woman speaking. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. One of the co-creators of the TV show Friends, perhaps the most monumentally successful worldwide global smash hit production ever, has apologized for the characters being white and pledged to give millions of dollars to Black education. Marta Kaufman told the LA Times that she finds it painful that all the main characters on the show were not diverse enough for modern standards, and that admitting and accepting guilt is not easy. Do we have these racially integrated groups of friends? I know we see them, in sitcoms and on TV commercials. Is that generally the case in real life? I do not believe that it is. The writer continued, what makes this truly emotional for me is that I want this connection I didn't have. I deeply, deeply want this connection with the Black community that I didn't have. Because of Friends, I never attained that. You did, however, make an awful lot of money. So what is she saying here? That she wanted to be friends with Black people, but they said, aren't you that woman responsible for Friends? Yes. Yes, that was me. Well, we can't be friends with you then. You had your chance and you blew it, lady. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know better 25 years ago, Kaufman continued, adding that the death of George Floyd in 2020 prompted her to realize that she had internalized systemic racism and participated in it, and that she needed to course correct. Now, to correct her white guilt, Kaufman says she will give $4 million to fund an endowed chair in Brandeis University's African and African American Studies department. Kaufman added, I'm finally, literally putting my mouth where my mouth is. I feel I was finally able to make some difference in the conversation. I've been working really hard to become an ally and anti-racist, and this seemed to me to be a way that I could participate in the conversation from a white woman's perspective. I have to say, after agreeing to this, and when I stopped sweating, it didn't unburden me, but it lifted me up. But until in my next production, I can do it right, it isn't over. I want to make sure from now on in every production I do that I'm conscious in hiring people of color, and actively pursuing young writers of color. I want to know I will act differently from now on, and then I will feel unburdened. Kaufman's co-creator of Friends, Kevin Bright, was also recently asked about a lack of diversity on the show, to which he replied, I would have been insane not to hire those 6 actors. What can I say? I wish Lisa Kudrow was Black. Cheers. Cheers indeed. Yes, there are different priorities today now. Look, one of the reasons why Friends was so successful is because it was a white group of friends. There's no racial tension amongst the group. Racial tension makes people uncomfortable. You can have a successful show that makes people uncomfortable, but not a smash hit like Friends. Someone called Dr. Spooner tweeted Black Ross, Asian Rachel, Gay Joey, or Latina Phoebe. Imagine how funny that would have been. You know, they talked about this sort of thing on Community, where I guess this came from an NBC network note. Amongst the study group, there were two black characters, one male, one female, and there was a character who was supposed to be half Palestinian and half Polish, played by Danny Pudi, an actor who is half Hindu and half Polish. But people were always saying, you know, I'd like to see a Latina in there. You know, you're not diverse enough. Ian McGee said there weren't many white people in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Did we get an apology for that? Creative Deduction says, what I was thinking, it sounds like a hostage video. And in a sense, that's what it is. So many people are hostages to the woke ideology and have no choice but to play along and use phrases like ally and internalized racism. It's embarrassing. Peeps Be Free tweeted, hate to break it to you, but most friend circles aren't diverse. And guess what? That's okay. I'd much rather see an authentic show that reflects reality than a forced diverse show, which usually reeks of fakeness. And I can't watch. Let's go back to the chat. Jay Boss says Marta Kaufman is Swedish, of course. Hello to our Finnish friend Jaakko Raipala says, I'm going to visit Estonia soon. Their official inflation is like 15%, but I hear it's actually way worse in the stores. How does the Finnish currency compare in strength? Oh, you're all with the euro now. Of course. This is ridiculous. You know, there used to be there were countries, Greece was one, that was a popular tourist destination because their currency was weak. Portugal was another such place. And so they all joined the euro, and there are no bargains in Europe anymore, and things are ridiculously overpriced in countries where they shouldn't be. William Hicks says in the 1990s, there were plenty of shows with diverse casts, such as NYPD Blue or Homicide Life on the Street. Jokin666 adds, yes, Italy as well. Who else do we have here? William Hicks again. Kaufman's guilt sounds so profound. She's trying to make amends. Better late than never. Quachalango, hello, says, I just interrupted my dinner to give an old gray-haired lady a battery jump. Well, that's very decent of you. Dibba the Gnome says, the Vorticists were right-wing. Yeah. Wyndham Lewis certainly was. Wyndham Lewis, he's claimed as Canadian. He wasn't Canadian, but he's claimed as Canadian. He was born on a yacht, went off the coast of Nova Scotia. He did serve in the Canadian Army during the First World War as a bombardier and as a war artist. Many excellent paintings from that period. Yo Mama says Marta Kaufman wrote the episode where Phoebe thinks her mom was reincarnated as a cat. Ruslan Akhmetov says Islam is right about women and alphabet people. Should have relocated to Eastern Europe before COVID, says Ruslan Akhmetov. Hello to respectable commenting name. Says, I'm enjoying not 50% inflation in this not recession we've not been in. The more I'm accused of fascism, says RCN, the more open I am to just telling them their terms are acceptable and acting accordingly. Hello to Jay Boss, who says, Rustin Shackelford, we can live forever, pointing out the hypocrisy of those who care not. We can try to find a more permanent solution. It reminds me, a couple of days ago, I was watching Norm Macdonald stuff on YouTube, And he said, I guess this was on his podcast, he said that he'd heard Patton Oswalt say that the worst part of the Bill Cosby scandal was the hypocrisy. And Norm Macdonald says, I don't understand that. The worst part was the raping, then the drugging, then the scheming. Hypocrisy way down the list. Rustin Shackelford says it's very disingenuous when people talk about the sanctity of the privacy of one's bedroom when we just got through a month of worshiping male-on-male homosexuality in public. Spaniards under Franco were unbelievably elegant. Look at them now under Chavez. Madurismo, says Ruslan Akhbatov. Chokin666 says you would think that the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski would know that fascism isn't just an epithet. You would think so, but she's stupid. She's stupid. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Tarot Destroyer quotes Bill Maher. I'm pro-choice. I'm for assisted suicide. I'm for regular suicide. I'm for whatever gets the freeway moving. That's what I'm for. Tarot Destroyer says Mika used to be good looking. Well, I'll have to take your word for it. I had a Nokia phone, says Chogoken666. Nokia is a Finnish company, I believe. Whatever happened to them? Did they disappear entirely? Didn't they have some sort of deal with Microsoft? Okay. So now, yeah. Jane Fonda, still alive, still loopy, and for some reason was not hanged for treason during the Vietnam War. This is what she tweeted 2 days ago. If a corporation can be defined as a person, why not redefine vaginas as AK-47s? That way they'd be free of governmental restrictions by those who care about the so-called sanctity of life. I don't believe for a second that Jane Fonda knows what an AK-47 is, and I'm almost certain she's one of those people who believes that semi-automatic means fully automatic. There are very strict restrictions on fully automatic weapons in the United States, but one can't expect Jane Fonda to know that. Altogether now, abortion is not used as a form of birth control. No. This is from Aaron Keller at the New York Post. Chelsea Handler claims her 3 abortions led School Hall of Fame to shun her. Chelsea Handler has claimed her New Jersey high school will not induct her into its Hall of Fame because she has been open about having abortions. Livingston Public Schools officials, however, told the Post that her claims are false. The 47-year-old comedian shared that she had 3 abortions while attending her New Jersey high school during her guest host monologue Monday on Jimmy Kimmel Live. 3 abortions in high school. High school used to be 5 years. What is it, 4 years now, I believe. One could say that 1 abortion in high school is unfortunate. 3 sounds like carelessness to me. Jason Alexander and Chris Christie made it, but not me, she said, referencing the Seinfeld alum and former state governor. Apparently, the school is upset how much I talk about my abortions, so I decided to start a grassroots campaign. You want to guess how many children Chelsea Handler has? It's kind of a trick question. The answer, of course, is a big fat 0. Chelsea Handler is not a very good spokesperson for this point of view. What you're supposed to say is, I had an abortion because I needed to, because it would have ruined my life, but now I am the mother to a fine child, or maybe 2 or whatever. And this wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't had that abortion in the past. Chelsea Handler just doesn't like children. Three sounds like I love of murder, says respectable commenting name. Tarot Destroyer quotes Henry Miller from Tropic of Cancer. Chaos is the score upon which reality is written. What did that other female comic say about Chelsea Handler? She made her career on her back. Well, who'd want to procreate with Handler, says Dan. She has hit the wall. She hit the wall very hard. She's 47 after all. Jaco Rapala says Nokia was actually a giant conglomerate that pretty much made everything. The rubber business was turned into a separate company, and it's still doing well. Well, thank you for that. A lot of these celebrities who say that they had an abortion in high school and they're very glad to have done so, it often turns out that they had more than one. And I've noticed this many, many times, reading Wikipedia bios. Oh, they admit that they had an abortion and then they had another one. Okay, so you went through this traumatic experience, and so you took no steps to ensure that it didn't happen again. Was Erickson Finnish, asks Chogokin 666. I said something ruder about Chelsea Handler, that she, here's the clean version of this, she slept her way to the middle. And Nokia failed to foresee smartphones, says Jaco Rapala. Once they realized their mistake, they made an exclusive deal with Microsoft to make Windows phones, just as Android was about to win the war. Che Blatarsky says Mika has been smart enough to keep herself alive while being around Joe Scarborough, so she must be smarter than some. Oh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yes, I've seen this quote a lot lately. This is from Tarot Destroyer. Frankly, I had thought that at the time Roe was decided, there was concern about population growth, and particularly growth in populations that we don't want to have too many of. I'm going to be discussing that right now. Perfect segue. This is from Robert Stark's Substack. A rather unconventional solution has been proposed to address inequity. Joe Matthews proposes foster care for all in a San Francisco Chronicle op-ed. Want true equity? I propose modestly forcing California parents to swap children. Matthews states that the rich should give their children to the poor, and the poor should give their children to the rich. Homeowners might swap children with their homeless neighbors. This reminds me of something I was talking about maybe on this live stream. The importance of genetics, and I said that let's take Pete Buttigieg as an example. There's nature and nurture there. Pete Buttigieg is both of his parents university professors at Notre Dame, and obviously Pete Buttigieg grew up in a house where knowledge was respected, even revered, and he had many more resources in that regard than, say, his black constituents when he was mayor of South Bend, Indiana. But, switching out, that wouldn't be enough. And I said, if you're really looking for, this ridiculous word, which conservatives, a phrase that conservatives are in love with, equality of opportunity, there is no such thing. And it would be a totalitarian effort to try to bring about equality of opportunity. If you wanted to bring about, the same level of opportunity, comparing Buttigieg with most of his black constituents when he was mayor of South Bend, maybe you could just hit Pete Buttigieg over the head repeatedly until he suffered enough brain damage that his IQ fell 30 or 40 points. Stark continues, the reactions from conservatives were predictable, and on the surface it appears that Matthews was trolling conservatives with a facetious and satirical tone, in that, quote, now I recognize that some naysayers, hopelessly attached to their privilege, will dismiss such a policy as ghastly, even totalitarian, unquote. However, sometimes trolling and satire can reflect one's true intentions and power fantasies. This even applied to how the alt-right in 2016 would troll with gas chamber and helicopter ride memes for shock values. Universal orphanhood could be interpreted as a thought experiment, but even Richard Dawkins got in trouble for his thought experiment, stating that eugenics would work in principle, but is still ethically wrong. Regardless, the universal orphanhood proposal reflects how the equity left thinks and how extreme, authoritarian, and out of touch with normal people they have become. The proposal is class-based with racial overtones, though much of the left hates poor whites more than rich non-whites. Matthews states, quote, institutions from dance ensembles to tech companies have publicly pledged themselves to equity along with diversity and inclusion, but their promises of newly equitable systems are no match for the power of parents, unquote. I wonder if Matthews understands that equity does not mean the same as equality. I rather doubt that he does. Stark comments, this is an admission that existing equity policies have failed, in part because they go against human nature and thus need to become more authoritarian to achieve their objectives. There is an angle of punishment and revenge against the children of whites and the wealthy that the article morally justifies, because separating migrant children is only a short walk to a wholesale separation of all Americans from their progeny. But these migrant children are not American, are they? Of course, Matthews, I guess, citizenship is as nothing to him. Stark continues, obviously, if implemented, universal orphanhood would be atrociously to horrible abuses and violate basic human rights. However, there are ironic parallels to the great class swap, my thought experiment that addresses the societal problem that too much wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, while too much population growth is concentrated in the underclass, with both trends squeezing out the middle. The thought experiment is a scenario in which wealth is redistributed from the top down to the masses, while the genetic makeup of the upper bracket is also redistributed downwards. It is basically socialism, but fused with eugenics, while the great class swap is focused on uplifting civilization rather than retribution, like left-wing equity politics. It could still be authoritarian if taken to an extreme. It's hard to tell if Joe Matthews has some awareness of genetics beyond blank slatism in saying, quote, fathers and mothers with greater wealth, education, other resources are more likely to transfer these advantages to their children, compounding privilege over generations, unquote. It has always been this way, and it will always be this way, unless you want to recreate Stalin's Russia, or Soviet Union, rather. Even if there's no explicit acknowledgement that genetic factors impact success, it is unintentionally a gateway to hereditary-based thinking. If this atrocious idea were implemented, it would expose truths about the nature versus nurture debate. Well, it's over. Nature wins. This has been known for decades. And to what degree privilege is based upon economic and social opportunities and how much is hereditary. The left realizes that economic redistribution alone won't guarantee equity, and that explains the integrationist ideology, such as the push for coercive and mandated racial diversity in housing to education. Steve Saylor explains it as the left's view that underprivileged people of color have a right of access to white people besides their material resources. The philosophy of universal orphanhood, encapsulated by Matthews' statement that ending parenthood would end the backlash, helping dismantle white supremacy and outdated gender norms. Gender norms? Why did he throw that in there? Echoes Pol Pot's Year Zero, as so far a complete erasure of all intergenerational cultures and traditions in order to start over from scratch. However, Matthews even claims influence from traditional philosophy, such as Plato's Republic, referencing that Plato adopted Socrates' sage advice that children be possessed in common so that no parent will know his offspring or any child his parents, in order to defeat nepotism, prevent the amassing of great fortunes, and create citizens loyal not to their sons but to society. Plato did advocate for eugenics, and there are parallels between Plato's Republic and the great class swap. Obviously, collective ownership of children is atrocious, but is relevant to modern public education's objective, which is to socialize children into the values of mass society rather than that of their family, tribe, or ethnicity. The great class swap may seem very collectivist and focused on maintaining a mass society, but my vision, that's Stark's vision, calls for greater decentralization, including neo-tribalism and enclaveism, to counterbalance the problems of modern class society. The great class swap also has parallels to bell curve leftism. Andrew Sullivan's description of the outlook of Marxist author Freddie de Boer and his book, The Cult of Smart, which makes a moral case for the less intelligent. The book is very critical of the modern liberal concept of meritocracy, which places moral value upon people based on their success in life under a framework of genetic blank slatism. Yes, what we call meritocracy. Well, part of it, is being a SWAT. Frankly, I don't think that memorizing answers to tests, aiming for 100% scores on all your courses, uh, shows that these people are particularly worthy. That's a very, very narrow skill. It is possible to memorize all the answers to the tests without really understanding what it is that you are studying, particularly if cheating is involved. And cheating is rife in the SATs. To give just one example, I mean, one looks for a multiplicity in students, or one should. Actually, one of the reasons that universities have become not just such unpleasant places, but such boring places is, got to score 99, got to score 100 on the test. I am sympathetic to De Boer's idea of letting the super smart create most of the wealth and then taxing the hell out of them to fund healthcare and UBI, especially in a post-scarcity economic future, e.g. fully automated luxury communism. There is a need for a great class swap inspired policies that are palatable, practical, reasonable, and humane. Great class swap policies are encapsulated by policy proposals from the blogger J-Man, who describes himself as a liberal social democratic patriot. J-Man advocates for positive eugenics that encourage the high IQ and accomplished to reproduce more, including reducing the cost of living, student loan forgiveness, reducing the need for lengthy educations by relying more heavily on cognitive tests, special encouragement of exceptionally high IQ individuals, and workplace reform, both for working and stay-at-home moms. However, J-Man also touches upon negative eugenics, and that Planned Parenthood centers could be built and heavily marketed in low-income areas with heavy availability and marketing of long-term contraceptive measures such as Norplant, and that, quote, welfare should incentivize childlessness, not having more children as it currently does. Generous welfare benefits should be made available to single childless individuals with static or decreasing benefits for having children, unquote. Stark continues, eugenics is extremely taboo, has the potential for state abuse, and fertility is already declining among the poor. Therefore, it would make more sense to focus on positive eugenics and scrap negative eugenics. I would advocate for UBI, but for adults only, in a tax incentive structure that places very high taxes on billionaires and also raises taxes on well-off childless dinks, with a gradual tax deduction for having children plus subsidies for private education and homeschooling. Well, we're talking about income taxes on billionaires. You can't pay tax if you have no income. And one of the tricks that very rich people do is to take out loans, not salary, but loans. So they end up not paying any income tax at all. So Stark continues, I am not a total genetic determinist, but blank slatism and taboos about genetics need to be rejected if we are serious about solving income inequality. Even if eugenics is taboo to discuss explicitly, existing social mechanisms and incentive structures shape demographic trends. In regards to the recent divisive Scottish ruling to overturn Roe v. Wade, it is ironic that it is actually the left that takes a more eugenic position. One liberal psychologist more explicitly promoted eugenics, tweeting, quote, therapy should be a free prerequisite for parenthood. We require a license to drive a car, but anyone can procreate and pass a lifetime of trauma responses to the next generation with no oversight or support. Yeesh, unquote. Well, as Chesterton said, if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. On the contrary, pro-life Catholic conservative Matthew Walther had an article in the New York Times that was brutally honest. Quote, "In America without abortion would mean more single mothers and more births to teenage mothers, increased strain on Medicaid and other welfare programs, higher crime rates, a less dynamic and flexible workforce, an uptick in carbon emissions, lower student test scores, and goodness knows what else," unquote. Walther would accept a much poorer and less dynamic America in order to end such a moral travesty. However, he parts ways from many pro-life conservatives in that he advocates for the most generous and humane provisions for mothers and children, paid family leave, generous child benefits, direct income subsidies for stay-at-home mothers, the single-payer health care without being Pollyanna-ish. Stark comments, "While I'm sympathetic to the Scottish ruling on the grounds of decentralization, it could have long-term negative implications on demographics, poverty rates, and income inequality. Banning abortion is dysgenic, since those who have abortions tend to be the poorest, least intelligent, and most reckless and irresponsible as contraceptives are widely accessible." How does that explain Chelsea Handler, though? Blogger Anatoly Karlin sums up the ironies of the divisiveness over overturning Roe v. Wade in that liberals are, quote, "seething about U.S. delegating abortion policy to states, essentially becoming like Europe, while rightoids celebrate a boost to future Dem constituency, poor blacks," unquote. Society has undergone a massive transformation due to globalization, rapid demographic change, elite overproduction, cultural liberalism, and technological changes with the information age and automation. Many of these changes have created immense economic growth, but have also caused extreme inequality and social atomization. This coming apart of society is largely why politics are so crazy today. The coming economic crash and acceleration in automation will only further exacerbate this breakdown. I don't know. How about if we look at eugenics and dysgenics from the other perspective? It is well known that post-secondary education is bad for births. The more education a woman has, the less likely she is to have children. It seems to me that there are societal pressures which could be used against this trend. Now, when a woman, say, gets a master's degree, and I would say, perhaps, accepting an MBA, if a woman gets a master's degree in liberal arts, what is the point of this? Of course, you have women who get all of these degrees, school teachers, vice principals, principals, or whatever. I don't know. I think this is they think it's prestigious or whatever. But in most cases, there is little point in getting postgraduate degrees unless one intends to go into the academy oneself. And that, in the 60s and 70s, that would have been a good bet, because universities were springing up like weeds, hiring everybody. Well, it's not like that anymore. Universities prefer not to hire professors. They prefer to hire administrators, and increasingly teaching assistants are, they're the ones who are instructing your children at their $80,000 a year institutions. Yes, of course, you're always going to see this kind of dysgenics among the lower orders, but the dysgenics among the higher orders is a relatively new phenomenon. That is to say, well, I'll give you the most extreme example: the Parsis, the descendants of the Zoroastrians who ended up in India. If current trends continue, within 2 to 3 generations, there will be no more Parsis. They will have bred or, refuse to breed themselves out of existence. And the reason for that is the very high level of education amongst Parsi women. Smart women should have children. And I don't know, they have been persuaded or brainwashed that having children is for idiots, or that I can't possibly afford to have a child. Well, got to have the nanny, and I can't afford a nanny. That sort of thing. And let's talk about Corona Doom. This is from Spencer Kimball at CNBC. The Food and Drug Administration backs changing COVID booster shots to target most recent Omicron subvariants. The FDA has asked the companies to start clinical trials on these newer subvariants. Ooh, more jabs. This one, it covers BA4 and BA5. Is it going to be as efficacious as your previous vaccines? Never mind that. Never mind that. We can get the government to approve. We can get the government to approve. And yeah, Pfizer BioNTech set to supply the U.S. government with 105 million COVID-19 vaccine for U.S. 3.2 billion. This is from thedeepdive.ca. Jordan Schachtel commented, just ran the number on Biden admin's new vax deal with Pfizer. The old deal gave Pfizer $19.50 a dose. They're now paying $30. Pfizer raised price by over 50%. The deal will bring Pfizer $9.5 billion. Their expected revenue is over $100 billion this year, shattering records. Criminal. None of the shots will be delivered under an FDA-approved label, and there is no real evidence the juice works for current strains. Additionally, there are already hundreds of millions of unused doses sitting around, which makes this whole op resemble a sketchy laundering operation. We still have vaccine mandates in Canada, even though many people deny it. And the Corona Doom is being used as an excuse for the government to surveil us and to control our movements. This is from Brian Pacifiume at the National Post. Comments from a federal cabinet minister suggest a controversial government travel app is set to become permanent, and changes quietly rolled out Tuesday to both the ArriveCan smartphone and its website suggest the app is being rolled into ongoing efforts to modernize Canada's ports of entry, except for refugees and people who just walk across the border. Speaking in Windsor Tuesday, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino said the app, designed to ostensibly streamline entry into Canada by allowing travelers to upload proof of mandatory COVID-19 vaccination, had potential to find greater use in processing cross-border travelers. Mendicino said, ArriveCan was originally created for COVID-19, but it has technological capacity beyond that to shrink the amount of time that is required when you're getting screened at the border. While compliance is high, not using ArriveCan comes with consequences. Canadians and permanent residents who refuse to use the app or encounter problems with it are subject to additional border delays, mandatory quarantine, and even fines, while foreign nationals who don't upload their information to ArriveCan may be denied boarding or even turned away at the border, unless you're a so-called refugee from Afghanistan, in which case the government will just fly you to Pearson Airport. Meanwhile, other evidence suggests ArriveCan will become a permanent part of Canada's cross-border experience. Early Tuesday morning, the introductory paragraph on ArriveCan's website was quietly changed to suggest the app is due for major changes. According to online web archives, the line, "It only takes minutes to help keep each other safe," was removed just after 8:30 a.m. Tuesday, replaced with, "ArriveCan is not only keeping travelers safe, but is part of our ongoing efforts to modernize our border." The app itself also saw a big update. Version 3.0.2 of ArriveCan was pushed to IO users Tuesday and includes the capability to allow travelers to transmit customs declarations forms ahead of their arrival. On Wednesday, Canada announced current public health measures for travelers arriving in Canada are with us for the summer, extending mandatory use of the ArriveCan app until at least September 30th. Yes, if I can get on a plane now, but if I were to, say, fly to the United States and then fly back to Canada, I'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. afterwards. And Maxime Bernier was mocked by Canada's leading conservative columnist, Andrew Coyne, for stating that ArriveCan is a rollout of a Chinese-like social credit system. It doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory to me. This is from Sarah Turnbull at CTV News. The federal government announced Wednesday all existing border restrictions to enter Canada will remain in place until at least September 30th. That means foreign travelers will still need to provide proof of being fully vaccinated to enter the country, and unvaccinated Canadians or permanent residents will need to provide a molecular COVID-19 test taken prior to entering and quarantine for 14 days upon arrival. The government is also still requiring all travelers, regardless of citizenship, to upload their vaccine information and travel documents to the ArriveCan app. Who was it that just got the corona doom again? Would that be Justin Trudeau? And how many shots has he had? 4? 5? But yeah, keep getting the jabs. Keep getting the jabs, because the jabs show that you care. You care about other people. Never mind empirical evidence. Caring is far more important than empirical evidence. Let's see. Today is Thursday, and it's the last day of the month. So tomorrow is National Generic Holiday Day, which is a day which has been given over to the celebration of immigrants. Has been for decades now. The real celebration of Canadian identity, to the extent that it still exists, takes place on Remembrance Day, November the 11th. So it being the eve of our National Generic Holiday Day, we're getting a lot of thumbsuckers about what it means to be Canadian, or more to the point, what it means to hate Canada, because Canada is a hateful country and always has been. This is Eric Ibrahim at the Canadian Press. Puneet Luthra has always taken advantage of the Canadian flags his local MP's office gives away so he can raise one at his Toronto home. I just think it looks great. I think it's beautiful, he said. But this year, he said, it feels different. The sad part is sometimes I wonder what people are going to think if I put the flag up. People could think I'm someone with fringe ideas, like anti-vaxxers and things like that. The country is typically awash in red and white on the national holiday, but this year people across Canada are reflecting on the relationship with the maple leaf. The Freedom Convoy demonstrators that gridlocked the streets of Ottawa in February may seem a long way off in the July sun, but the memory of protesters draped in flags, waving them while singing the national anthem and hanging them from the trucks whose horns blared day and night. Blatant falsehood. Canadian Press, blatant falsehood. Erica Ibrahim, they stopped honking the horns at 6 p.m. every day. Ottawa is bracing for a new round of protests, with police saying this Canada Day will be unprecedented and unique, with a never-before-seen security posture. Luthra added, people have made everyone confused about the value, the impact, and the power of the Canadian flag, and that's pretty sad. Blaine Chalk says he's felt a shift in his feelings about the flag's meaning since the convoy protest, during which flags were used for what he called extreme patriotism. While dropping his son off at a recent birthday party, he saw a truck drive by with Canadian flags and convoy-related stickers. I wonder if he burst into tears. It's getting a connotation of people who are the loudest are always the ones waving the flag, said Chalk, who lives in London, Ontario. But Megan Ball-Rigdon said it's the country's own complicated colonial history that has her hesitant to embrace the red and white. Did she just wake up yesterday and discover that Canada was founded as a colony? Well, it was founded as a colony of France and then Britain. Did she not know this until recently? I don't think I would be waving one myself regardless of the convoy, quite frankly, she said. While Rigdon said people in her mom's generation chose the Canadian flag No, not her mom's generation. And it's close to their hearts for being representative of the good things that we are. She said there's a front yard in her home city of Windsor, Ontario, that is red and white with hundreds of flags. That person's doing it with nothing but love, but I understand it can mean a lot more for a lot of people. Paul Litt, history professor at Cartoon U, says the conservative reactionary forces were totally opposed to the maple leaf. Yes, indeed, and they were quite right, because it is meaningless and generic and destructive of our history. At the time, English and French Canadians were termed the two founding people. He said, you can't do that anymore. Well, it's true, but we just can't say it. Almost 60 years on from that, people in Canada are starting to see their country and its founding in a different way. No, they're being bashed over the head and told lies about our country. Time passing has really changed our perspective on ourselves, said Ball Rigdon. She feels the flag is representative of a political system that oversaw the colonization of Indigenous peoples. No, it isn't. You could argue that the red ensign was representative of that, but the new Canadian flag, which became formal in 1965, was deliberately designed to have no reference whatsoever to Canada's history, tradition, and founding peoples. That's its whole point. Noting the discoveries of unmarked graves at residential schools throughout the country. Oh yes, the hoax of the century. I think people are realizing that we've done a really good job at branding ourselves in Canada as being kind and loving all the time. But like anyone else, we've had our moments of being the oppressor. It was that reckoning with Canada that led Chalk to buy a Canadian Indigenous flag last year, designed by unpronounceable Indian band artist Curtis Wilson. It felt weird flying the Canadian flag after all those events, Chalk said. I felt strongly that I'd rather fly that. I'm still proud to be Canadian, but I kind of think we've kind of left Indigenous people by the wayside for a long time. It's not perfect, but might as well try. While people on the right may seem to be appropriating the flag, as seen with convoy demonstrators, he said that those on the left set themselves up for it by rejecting a lot of sacred national symbols. If they're going to be unpatriotic, then we'll be super patriotic, Litt said of the right's thinking. Canada's national identity has always been contentious, and people can identify strongly with the flag because they project themselves onto that imagined national community. Yes, of a maple leaf. Yeah, so once again, I'm not surprised. Erica Ibrahim, of course, there's a gross lie in this. Oh, this story was produced with the financial assistance of the Meta and Canadian Press News Fellowship. Couldn't she have found someone who likes the Canadian flag, who is not troubled by it, who does not think that flying the flag makes him or her an extremist, a hate monger? She could have tried a little harder, but that was not the point of her story. The point of her story was simply agate prop. Do more to counter violent extremism in Canada, MPs recommend. This is from Elizabeth Thompson, the faithful scribe of CBC News. Hate, 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 hate. Apparently, there's a problem with information. Did you know that? People are saying things. Foreigners are corrupting Canadians, presumably Americans, by saying things about Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Yeah, as if that has anything to do with us. And from the United States, from Bob Hoge or Hoga, I don't know how it's pronounced, at Red State, 14,000 Army Guard troops could be axed today for refusing the Corona Doom virus. That's about 13% of the force have not yet gotten the mandated jab. And as the deadline for shots loom, at least 14,000 of them have flatly refused and could be forced out of the service. Meanwhile, the United States Army, fewer and fewer people want to join. They're 27% short on their recruitment goals. They've taken to cold calling high school students. Yep. And what are they telling them? They're telling them about all the gibs, all of the gibs that they can get for joining. None of this be all you can be. Do you remember the commercial for the Marines that ran, I don't know, a couple of decades ago, where they showed a medieval warrior on his white steed with his sword in battle, and then you saw a lightning flash, and it hit his sword, and then he was transformed into a Marine in full dress uniform. Outstanding, absolutely outstanding. But they're not. That's not the sort of ethos that they are looking for these days. Let's go to Eugippius. I found this latest post, which is truncated because it's for subscribers only. It's disturbing what he writes about Germany. I think it was a new airport in Tempelhof in Berlin. Years behind schedule, billions over budget. The building starting to fall apart even before it had opened. I mean, one associates the Germans with the efficiency, right? Eugippius writes, at the start of June, the German government introduced a 3-month period of essentially free public transit. In exchange for a monthly ticket costing just €9, you can take local or regional trains and buses anywhere. To the surprise of nobody, this has resulted in massive overcrowding on key routes as our national railway company, Deutsche Bahn, has proven unable to increase capacity due to worker shortages and outmoded, decaying infrastructure. One understands why rail infrastructure in the United States became outmoded and decayed because, well, the interstate highway system. Trains are obviously far more important in Britain and in Europe than they are here. How did they become outmoded and decayed? Eugippius says, in an instant, we abandoned the artificially suppressed demand of the lockdown era for the artificially enhanced demand of symbolic green environmentalism. I spent some time over the weekend near the Bavarian Alps at various destinations popular with the €9 ticket club. The transit chaos is a thing to behold. At one point, I boarded a regional bus with a sign begging passengers to avoid riding at peak times unless absolutely necessary, and apologizing for the inability to run a more frequent schedule. There are just no more drivers to be had for love or money. Within a few stops, the bus was too full to accept further passengers. Scores of people were left to wait an hour or two on the side of the road for the next one, on the off chance they might be able to squeeze on them. These regional bus networks aren't just for fun and sightseeing. If you live in rural Bavaria and don't have a car, this is how you go shopping. It's how you get to the rail stations. At the end of the day, my train home was so unbelievably crowded that I had serious problems getting out at any stop. We're ruled by stupid people. Let's make the buses essentially free. So, what effect is that going to have on capacity? Oh, it's going to mean that more people are going to stop using their cars and use their buses. Do we have the capacity to deal with that? Yeah, don't worry about that. We'll worry about that, if something terrible happens, but not before, because that's not our job. Our job is to be green. And let's look at Alec Berenson's Substack. There are developments in his suit against Twitter. And Berenson versus Twitter, whereas the parties have reached a settlement in principle. Now, I can't say anything more until we actually file the settlement, dismiss the case, and even then I won't be able to say much about the specifics of the settlement, as those are largely confidential. But I want to say this, at least from my point of view, Elon Musk had nothing to do with what's happening here. And he is skeptical that Elon Musk will, in fact, buy Twitter. An update. Okay, this has now gotten out of hand. None of you know what Twitter and I agreed to. None of you know what's in the settlement, especially not a Jordan Schachtel. or any of the other blue checks on both left and right who have been sucking my exhaust for 2 years and are just desperate to call me a grifter. I'm getting an unbelievable view from the inside of how journalism works, or more accurately, does not work in the age of Twitter. Schachtel had tweeted, Alex Berenson has settled with Twitter after claiming he was motivated to file a lawsuit to shine a light on the company's censorship apparatus. Pretty sure he also fundraised off of this effort. So will the donors get their money back? Doubtful. Berenson comments, I've said it before, and I suppose I'll say it again. I have always been lucky in my enemies. And a final update, at least for now, add Judge Alsup to the folks who are apparently mad Berenson v. Twitter settled. An unusual ruling, to say the least, can't make anyone happy today. I will say again, you don't know what you don't know. And I was well aware that no one would forget my Substack on June 6th, the one where I promised all of you there would be no settlement without third-party discovery. So you can choose to believe that I went back on my word for 30 pieces of silver, or you can choose to believe I meant what I said. Anyone who wants a donation back is welcome to it. Just let me know. One question which Berenson hasn't answered is Twitter unbanning him? I would think that would have to be in this settlement. Otherwise, why settle? Let's take a look at the chat. Here we go. Yes, we've heard from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG. Ruslan Akhmetov says, need to go, gents. Good night. Thank you for tuning in. I take it you own more Japanese-made watches than Swiss ones, yes? That's Anrun of Jogan 666. I don't own any watches. I believe I talked about that recently. Yes. There was a Jack in the Box commercial. Jack in the Box is a fast food chain on the west coast of the United States. And they have this character named Jack, okay, who has a round head, in a conical hat. And he's like, a clown. Funny. Commercials have been funny for decades. So there was this one where Jack in the Box had hired some young, millennial marketing woman, right? And she talked a mile a minute, and she was wearing problem glasses and all that, and just a bunch of gibberish was coming out of her mouth. And at the end of the commercial, she pointed at his arm and said, "What's that wrist necklace you're wearing?" And Jack says, "You mean my watch?" I guess the joke being that young people don't wear watches. Jay Boss says, I have a friend who was living in Turkey just last month after having fled from Ukraine. He liked it thoroughly, not a single complaint. David the Gnome. I guess he said this before what I said. I remember the old Marine commercials with like dragons and sword wielding warriors. Giant bug attack. Would you like to know more? Says Pete Bauman. David the Gnome says the maple leaf flag reeks of like third grade teacher vibes. Let's make a flag that means nothing and no one can be upset about it. Brian Frake says much prefer the old Canadian flag, the red ensign. It's a beautiful flag. Have you seen the state flag of Colorado? When I saw this, I couldn't believe it. It's a big C, letter C. That's it. It's a big letter C. Now, this has to be a fairly recent design because, nobody would have done that. Even 3 generations ago, nobody would have done that because it is so cringe. And I don't think we have, well, we'll see. Invasion USA. This is from Pete Williams at NBC News. The Supreme Court handed President Joe Biden a victory Thursday, ruling that he can shut down a Trump administration program designed to restrict immigration at the southern border. The court said in a 5-4 ruling that the Biden administration acted properly in seeking to end the Remain in Mexico policy, formerly known as the Migrant Protection Protocols. It required people seeking asylum at the southern border, mainly from Central America, to wait in Mexico while their claims were decided. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts said a lower court overreached when it found the policy had to remain in place. Under the Court of Appeals interpretation, he wrote, a judge could force the executive to the bargaining table with Mexico over a policy that both countries wish to terminate and to supervise its continuing negotiations with Mexico to ensure they are conducted in good faith. Roberts was joined by Justices Brett Kavanaugh, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Stephen Breyer. In a sharply worded dissent, Justice Samuel Alito criticized border policy and said it was his colleagues who erred. Due to the large number of aliens who attempt to enter illegally from Mexico, DHS does not have the capacity to detain all inadmissible aliens encountered at the border, and no one suggests that DHS must do the impossible. But rather than avail itself of Congress's clear statutory alternative to return inadmissible aliens to Mexico while they admit proceedings in this country, DHS has concluded it may forego that option altogether and instead simply release into this country untold number of aliens who are very likely to be removed if they show up for the removal hearings. Well, they're not going to show up, are they? The Biden administration is allowing an invasion of the United States, which many people would regard as treason and which others would see as compassion. Surveys have shown that something like, 70-80% of the population of the world would like to come to the United States. Oh, isn't that great? Imagine how big the GDP would be then. And here is a story from ADN America. Biden administration sees record levels of migration deaths and rescues at the border. Data published this month by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection shows that the number of border crossings increased significantly in the previous year. Many of the migrants who attempted to cross had already been intercepted and deported once before in the past 12 months. This year, the migrant re-encounter rate increased from 25% from 15%. This tells me that these people need to be imprisoned. Let them have a taste of imprisonment, then deport them. And, build internment camps for them, as John Derbyshire has suggested. The CBP data shows that most of the migrants encountered at the border are coming from Mexico, Central America, Cuba, and Haiti, as well as other Latin American countries. However, others are arriving from Turkey, India, and Russia. And of course, none of these people are vetted. None of these people are vetted. No one knows who they are. Are there terrorists there? Yes, certainly there are terrorists there. Are there criminals there? Violent criminals? Yes, probably large numbers of them. But compassion. Oberyn Waugh once wrote, compassion is the base currency, a substitute for thought. But yes, harm reduction, not harm reduction for Americans, but harm reduction for people who are not Americans. Because, foreigners are better people, right? I mean, everyone agrees that, right? And at VDARE, and this site is, this site is really, really slow for some reason. I hope it's not a DDoS attack or something like that. And, well, we'll have to skip that. This is from Joshua Young at the Post Millennial. During a press conference Thursday at the NATO Leadership Summit in Spain, President Joe Biden declared that Americans should expect to pay higher gas prices for as long as it takes to defeat Russian President Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. Did you know that the United States is at war with Russia? Well, it isn't, but it kind of is. And so Americans are just going to have to make that sacrifice for the plucky ukes. In response to a reporter asking, how long is it fair to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay that premium for this war? Biden responded that Americans who have been paying nearly $5 a gallon for gas for months should shell out the extra cash for as long as it takes, because Americans paying more helps Ukraine fight Russia. As long as it takes, so Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine, Biden responded. Inflation was soaring to record heights in America well before Putin invaded Ukraine. Biden's back-to-back $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan and $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill helped lead the economy to the highest inflation rate seen in 40 years in America. Ultimately, the reason why gas prices are up is because of Russia, Biden said, according to the Daily Mail, invoking his Putin's price hike supposition. Biden has been touting this statement since March. The reason why the food crisis exists is because of Russia not allowing grain to get out of Ukraine. Biden incorrectly invoked the war in Ukraine as a significant contributing factor to the supply chain crisis, which began in 2021 due to his mishandling of COVID-19. Despite these recent measures, Biden has said he's going to seize the opportunity to push America to more green energy and has closed pipelines, which were bringing the much-needed resource into the U.S. Yes, Ukraine. That's the important place. Far more important than the United States of America. And Malcolm K. has a piece at Compact Mag called Rising Prices, Rising Risks. And it begins, the liberal establishment is imploring the American people to pick democracy over such minor things as affordable gas and food. Writing in The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, or Major Tom, as I like to call him, laments, people who should be linking arms to save democracy are grousing about their student loans and the price of gas. The author David Rothkopf opines, the GOP would like the election to be about inflation. That's deflection. This election is and must be about stopping the GOP assault on our democracy and our rights. Instead of doing something about commodity prices, in other words, elites in the United States and Europe seem content to fall back on moral hectoring as an ersatz problem. There are a couple of problems here, ersatz solution rather. There are a couple of problems here. To start, exhorting the masses to ignore their grumbling stomachs for the sake of our democracy flies in the face of the fact that many Americans genuinely do think that democracy was undermined in the way the 2020 election was handled. Moreover, the American political system today is hardly something the ancient Greeks would recognize as a democracy. If anything, the current U.S. political system should be classified as an oligarchy and not a particularly functional one at that. Can you imagine the President of the United States saying that Americans are going to suffer greatly, indefinitely, because of, a corrupt country, a money laundering machine, where there is no freedom of the press at all? It's halfway around the world. And, of course, the United States ginned up this war with Russia. And I guess they're just not going to admit their mistake. They're just not going to do it. And I suppose if Americans start freezing in the dark this winter, well, those old people who die can die secure in the knowledge that, they sacrificed their lives for Zelensky. And in more money down a rat hole news, this is from Morgan Chalfant at The Hill. President Biden said Thursday that the U.S. plans to send an additional $800 million in security assistance to Ukraine, including advanced air defense systems and other offensive weapons. Biden disclosed the plans during a news conference following a NATO summit in Madrid, where he declared the alliance united in response to Russia's war in Ukraine. This summit was about strengthening our alliance, meeting the challenges of our world today as it is today, and the threats we're going to face in the future. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said earlier this week that the U.S. would be sending medium and long-range air defense systems to Ukraine, though he declined to specify the particular system. What are we up to? How many tens of billions is it now? And little Canada is also, it's also chipping in. This is by David Aiken at Global News. Canada is set to provide the Ukrainian armed forces with more than 3 dozen new armored personnel. Armored personnel doesn't mean armored personnel carriers. And some new drone cameras, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said as the NATO Leaders Summit in Madrid ended Thursday. Additionally, Canada will host 2 new NATO research centers. Oh, so I suppose deep state academics are making bank on this. One which will focus on new security challenges brought on by climate change. Oh, boo-grown hiss. And another which will focus purely on solving defense and security problems and inventing new defense technology. Oh, really? Does Canada invent any new defense technology? Has it ever? And let's check in on Moon of Alabama. No, NATO will not get ready for war. I had a good laugh when I read this nonsense. NATO to boost troops on high alert to over 30,000, according to Stoltenberg. Moon of Alabama comments, NATO does not have 300,000 troops to put on high alert. The troops are controlled by member states, and I see no willingness by any of them to shoulder the cost that a real high alert status would have. Units on high alert means that they are fully manned with no one on vacation and with enough supplies ready to sustain weeks of battle. All of that costs money. Member states will instead designate existing units as high alert ones and change nothing else in their usual equipment and training. The statement is pure NATO PR fluff. Stoltenberg did not even ask or inform member states before he made that announcement. And according to a story at the Washington Post, the Washington Post is skeptical here. Those 300,000 troops, concept, not reality. And apparently many of America's allies were quite taken aback by this announcement. No consultation. This was one of the ideas that is typical for NATO bureaucrats who live in their own fantasy world. They are the reason why French President Macron has called NATO brain dead. And no, it is really nothing more than an idea. A NATO official speaking on the condition of anonymity per the alliance's ground rules said that country-specific numbers still needed pinning down. Even the 300,000 total is theoretical for the moment. Even so, German Defense Minister Christina Lambrecht has already said her country will offer up 15,000 troops, a full division. Lambrecht offered nothing. She will put the fake high alert label on an existing division and change nothing else. That she did this is actually quite revealing. If Germany, as one of the bigger NATO countries, offers only one division-size element, where will the other 19 division-size elements come from that are needed to make up a 300,000 strong force? Do they even exist? NATO is just a shadow of its former self. Member states now have only a few troops that can be designated to work under NATO. Even those lack ammunition and depot weapons to make up for eventual losses. Some now even lack the industries to make more systems and grenades. They are also unable to make new ones that are fit for their purposes. Neither of the big or small modern weapons that were given to Ukraine has made a difference. The Javelins had empty batteries. The British NLAW anti-tank weapons were too weak to defeat Russian armor. Switchblade suicide drones are not controllable under Russian electronic warfare conditions. Stinger missiles have heat sensors that are too slow to acquire a fast-moving target. The light howitzer M777 are too light for real battle conditions and tend to break. NATO countries have put too much money into their air forces, which will be unable to break through Russia's excellent air defenses. NATO's air defense is, in contrast, too weak. Just ask the Saudis how well their Patriot systems worked against Yemeni drones. Those systems can do nothing against Russia's medium-range missiles. Systems like Iskander and Caliber, of which Russia has many, are hard to find in NATO armies. When is the last time NATO units have trained under electronic warfare conditions? The New York Times interviewed nearly 24 Ukrainian soldiers over the last several weeks who all pointed to similar problems. Russians jammed their radios constantly. They didn't have enough communication gear. and they often had difficulty getting through to a commander to call for artillery support. Talking to units stationed nearby was also an issue, they said, which has led to Ukrainian forces occasionally firing on one another. The general said that his two off-the-shelf radios were jammed constantly. They would use the stronger signal on the same frequency, he said. Troops in more specialized units have been issued U.S.-supplied encrypted radios and can speak to each other unhindered, one soldier said, but the radio's high output means the Russians can find the locations they are broadcasting from. This is why we stopped communicating and only communicated the necessary minimum, such as if an evacuation was needed or urgent help. The soldier, who goes by the name Raccoon, added. Materially, NATO is not ready to fight. Politically, it is not ready. John Helmer quotes excerpts from an interview with the former chief of staff of the Polish army, Mieczysław Gokul. You complain, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has announced the NATO summit in Madrid will be groundbreaking. Before the NATO summit in Warsaw in 2016 at the Pact's military committee, I asked Stoltenberg, what will be the guarantees for the eastern flank? He replied with a question, what else does Poland expect? I said straight out, security and prosperity, which is what the rest of us sitting at the table want. Just like that, I hear the same slogans today, and such as do more with less. There are also other fine-sounding calls, but these are only political slogans calculated for a positive public reaction and minimizing costs. They do not really bring about any political and military solutions. Now, the tension between Russia and Lithuania is growing because the sanctions are blocking the Kaliningrad Oblast more and more. Could this be a hot spot? If Putin wanted to start the war further and decided to cut a corridor through the Baltics to the Kaliningrad district at the Suwalki Gap, what forces could stop him? Could the forces of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland stop Putin? Not at all. Putin will not be stopped by the Americans, who are present on the eastern flank only in small numbers. I repeat, Russia talks and calculates only with strong countries and organizations, and NATO in our region is weak. Again, that is from the former chief of staff of the Polish army. Moon of Alabama concludes, it indeed is, and except for a few East European hotheads, everyone hopes it will stay so. None of the bigger NATO member countries wants a large fight with Russia. That includes the United States. Why then prepare for it? Why buy weapons that will never be used? On the other side, Russia does not want anything from Europe. It does not have an ideology that seeks expansion. It wants to be left alone. NATO is a Cold War relic that was kept alive to give the U.S. some political advantages. Its real purpose has never changed. Keep Germany down, Russia out, and the U.S. in Europe. That will only change when Western Europe starts to rebel against it. Unfortunately, the chances for that are low. And I think I'm going to take a final look at the chat and then wrap it up here. So, final look at the chat, and here we go. And scroll down to the bottom. Oh, Oscar Toe says, I taste no difference in buffalo and beef except drier. I used to live in Alberta, where they have bison herds, and every so often, it's one of those things in the media. Ooh, bison meat is really going to take off. It never does. Also, it's not llamas, alpacas, or some other animals like this. Ooh, this is really going to take off. It's a cycle, Every 3, 4, 5 years, you get all these stories about some exotic meat which is going to become popular. Doesn't happen. Hauper says, I had a buffalo burger a few months ago. Nothing to write home about. Anwar says, rabbits are rodents. Never eat rodents. Only one step above eating bugs. I know the Spanish eat rabbits. I once went to a particular kind of, it's the Spanish restaurant where you have all these little dishes. What's that called? And one of them was a rabbit dish. I like in some of the French films, guys are just walking around with dead rabbits for their dinner, says Oscar Toe. Rabbit tastes like chicken to me, says Oscar Toe. That was pretty much my impression. Pete Bauman says, weapon salesmen celebrate a huge victory, trebles all round. Want to eat a Roadrunner. There's not much meat there. Oh, yes, ostrich. Ostrich burgers. Everyone is going to be demanding ostrich burgers. No, it's never happened. It has never happened. Oh, someone talking about tapirs? Okay. I've never eaten capybara. Isn't that a large rodent? Rather, they're like hamsters, only they're large. Have I got that right or wrong? Quachalango says the pipe that supplies the north side of Seattle from Mount Lake is only about 3 feet in a diameter. Pete Bauman says Ukraine is playing us. Well, I think it's the United States is playing Ukraine because they own the place, because they bought it. You broke it. You bought it. Isn't that what Colin Powell said? The Pottery Barn rule. I'd rather feel sorry for them because they've been goaded, forced into a position which is already ruinous and is almost certainly going to prove catastrophic. The economy was already well wrecked, and now they're going to lose the Donbass forever. And that's where, the oil and gas are, and the minerals. Russia's ruble is the strongest currency in the world, has increased in value by 60% compared to the US dollar since February 24th of this year. That is from Star Rover. Star Rover adds Russia had a 0.5% deflation in the price of consumer goods and services in June and is projected to have deflation in July and August. Anwar says, everyone thinks otters are adorable, but they will mess you up beyond repair if you get on their bad sides in the wild. They're rather wasteful, with their fish killing. They kill a lot of fish, by biting chunks out of them. They don't really consume the rest. Beavers are the size of small refrigerators, says Quacha Longo. Sorry, City of New York State has Excelsior. Excelsior is a fine motto. And there's the famous poem by Longfellow. Okay, Maryland flag is awesome, says David the Gnome. Indeed it is. Quachalango says, I would have a bike and a motorbike in rural Bavaria. Someone get Kevin that Rolex stat, says Anne Run. I wouldn't wear a Rolex for lots of reasons. It's conspicuous consumption. The usage of it is associated with people that I don't like. Also, I would be terrified that someone would threaten my life for it. I know a lot of people who own Rolexes. Actually, they go out wearing fake Rolexes. My father had one. Because you don't. Yeah, someone wants your watch. Here, have my watch. You think it's worth thousands? No, it's just worth a couple of $100. I'm wearing a Seiko, says Chogokin 666. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to make a donation to this live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations may be made directly to the live stream via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection to ease the burden. Good night.